and welcome back to VETChat. I'm Kathryn Bell, CEO of the Webinar Vet, and today I am delighted to have Lizzie Lockett back on the podcast as our guest in honour of International Women's Day. Before we get started, let me introduce our guest. Lizzie is the CEO of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, leading the organisation through a period of transformation and progress in the veterinary profession. With a deep commitment to innovation, inclusion and mental well-being, Lizzie has played a pivotal role in shaping policies that support a more sustainable, diverse and forward-thinking veterinary workforce. Since stepping into the CEO role in 2017, Lizzie has spearheaded major initiatives, including the Mind Matters initiative, which champions mental health awareness and support across the profession. Also, the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group, driving actionable change in representation and equality. Passionate about accelerating change in veterinary medicine, Lizzie is an advocate for empowering women in leadership, fostering innovation, and ensuring the profession is equipped for the future. Her expertise and vision continue to shape the landscape of veterinary regulation, education, and professional development. So welcome back, Lizzie, to VETChat. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So this year for International Women's Day, the theme is all around accelerating action. And as soon as our marketing team were kind of talking about it, we thought, Lizzie Lockett. The name just kept popping up. We were like, let's get Lizzie on. And I'm so glad that we've been able to make it work. So thank you so much for being so flexible with timings and everything.
Not a problem.
So to start with, should we talk a little bit about your kind of leadership journey? Did you sort of always see yourself ending up in a leadership role, or was there any sort of like turning point that led you here?
It's a really good question. I think in a way, yeah, I was always probably going to have a leadership role. From my work kind of career perspective, I started managing people when I was 22-ish, so really early on in my career. And that sort of continued to be a theme all the way through, sort of, taking that leadership role. And even when I was at school, I guess I was always like putting my hand up for stuff, running the debating society, or I was never head girl actually, but I was deputy head girl and, running charities, this sort of thing. I never did any leadership in sports. I was always absolutely rubbish at sport. That continues to be the same. So I guess it's always on the cards, but it doesn't mean to say I think I'm any good at it or that I find it easy or that I'm always even conscious that I'm doing it. So it's sort of one of those things that just sort of happened. But did I see myself in this leadership role? I would say absolutely not. I thought I wanted to be a vet. I took A-levels to be a vet. I then went to practice, saw practice and really didn't like it at all. Had a complete change of plan and went to do an English degree, probably the only student doing English that had an S level in microbiology. And then I got sidetracked into journalism and then into public relations and marketing and veterinary marketing, and then ended up at the college. So it's been a really rather circuitous route. So I didn't always see myself in this role, no.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And while we're talking about it, huge congratulations on your 20 years at the Royal College. I saw
Thank you.
Thank
you very much. Yeah, not bad for a job that I thought I'd be in for 6 months.
Oh no, congratulations. Have there been any sort of like unexpected challenges sort of in the role that you're in as a kind of like CEO in the veterinary world?
I think actually the challenge of being a woman in the role was something that I wasn't expecting. I kind of have always worked in areas that have been quite male dominated. So the university that I went to, there were like 6 guys to every woman. At the college that I was at, when I worked in agriculture, it was quite male dominated. I thought I was kind of used to, in advertising again, quite male dominated sector. So I thought that I would kind of got used to that dynamic. Although there was some kind of everyday sexism in all of those roles, and maybe that's something we can talk about, I never really thought the fact that I was a woman, anybody ever questioned my ability to do the job because of that. And it wasn't until I actually came to the most senior role in the college that I started getting insinuations that as a woman I wouldn't be up to the job, which was the first time I'd actually experienced that in all of my career, which was really interesting. And I don't think that's necessarily anything about the veterinary profession. I think it is about a woman in a leadership position, in a serious leadership position where you do potentially have input and impact. I think that was something new for me.
Yeah, that's really sad, isn't it? But you obviously chose to ignore that and obviously pursued it anyway.
I can't ignore it. I find it really hard. I mean, the negative stuff that you get, and any leader gets. It's not just women. Let's make this clear. Anybody gets.
Yeah.
I think you you kind of you can either make a decision to kind of build a hide as tough as a rhino and crack on with it, but then inevitably you become a different sort of person through doing that, or you say this is going to hurt me, but I will learn how to cope with that, but not stop it, because once you stop letting things affect you, then I think that has an impact on your ability to be a compassionate leader as well. So it's a really fine balancing act between absorbing that and accepting it, but not wanting to be so thick-skinned that you're also brushing off other things that you need to be more sensitive to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, perfect sense. Absolutely. Okay, and I remember last time that we spoke, we did the podcast on failure and how to deal with different types of failure. And I know we touched upon imposter syndrome, and I remember you saying you didn't like that phrase, but with sort of imposter syndrome, you know, do you think that's sort of played any part in sort of the leader that you've become today?
Yeah, I would say only every day. I mean, it's one of those things that I think we all focus on. Although I think imposter syndrome, there's a kind of a bundle of things in there. There's the feeling that I can't do this job, and then there's the feeling that other people don't think I should be doing this job. And either way, you feel like a bit of an imposter, but I think they're quite different. I can't remember whether last time we spoke was pre or post pandemic, but I do remember during the pandemic, some of my imposter syndrome sort of actually weirdly went away. It was such a super stressful time for everybody. I had that feeling that you were in a room with a bunch of people who knew no more than you did. Like, we were all learning things all of the time. We were listening to the news cast. We were listening to the Prime Minister's stuff. You're trying to make sense of all of this and act on it as quickly as possible. And I was no worse set up to do that job than anybody else. So actually, weirdly, although it was very difficult, my imposter syndrome disappeared for a little while. It did come back. It came back. Of course, it came back. But I think that was quite interesting. I think the other part of it is people making you feel you shouldn't be in the room, and that comes a little bit with being a regulator. So no one is going to love you and what you do if you're a regulator. I think you have to accept that. I think the added complication for us is that as a Royal College that regulates, people don't always understand that dynamic. So they think we should be doing one thing when actually we're doing something else. So not only do they not like the thing we're doing, they grieve for the thing they think we should be doing. And so it gets quite complicated, and it's not really easy to explain that. And God, I've been here for 20 years and still not getting that right. Maybe it's time to show me the door, but it is complicated. But you mentioned kindly that 20-year anniversary thing. So I put a post on LinkedIn on Friday, I think it was, and people were actually being nice to me. And I found that the hardest thing of all. I was like, oh, don't be nice because I don't really deserve that, or don't put me on a pedestal because, I'm going to do something tomorrow that you're going to really regret, and you're going to think, why did I write that nice thing? Because actually she's terrible. All these thoughts are going around in my head rather than just going, oh, isn't that nice that 50 odd people have written something really nice about me? So I think there is always going to be something in my makeup that kind of sees something and makes the worst of it. And the way I try my kind of more sane moments to think about it is that if people are negative about the college, I will always be the first person to take all of that on my head. But if people are nice about us, I'll always say, oh, well, that was nothing to do with me. That was this department or that department. And I need to get better at going, if I'm prepared to take all the criticism, I should also take the praise.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress, I have to say, but that is where I would like to be.
Yeah, brilliant. And do you think as you've got older, you've got sort of better at managing that as well? Or do you still feel like it is there and it's still sort of chips away, as you say?
I think it's still there. And actually, weirdly, as you get older, you get less confident because you realise how little you know. And you also feel de-skilled as you move up the management chain. So my background's in communications, but if I was to go back into a hands-on communications job now, I wouldn't have a bloody clue what to do because there's all this new stuff that they're all doing, all the social media and the AI, this, that, and the other. And so I think in some ways you get older, you get less competent and confident. Also,
Yeah.
I have to say, getting to be a middle-aged woman, your body starts to let you down, and so your confidence in just being in a room with other people is like, oh gosh, that can be hard when you're sort of breaking out in hot sweats and all the rest of it. So yeah, honestly, I don't think it gets much easier. I know that's not the most positive message to send to young people, young women watching this, but yeah.
Well, yeah, brilliant. Just finally around leadership, is there any sort of lessons that you wish you'd learned earlier in your career?
I think the thing I would tell myself, and I still tell myself, is you don't have to do it all yourself. I am a team player because I've taught myself to be a team player. But I think if I was left to my own devices, I would sit in a corner and try and do it all myself, try and solve it all by myself. And I think when you're good at a specific job, in my case, communications, in the veterinary case, being a vet, you get good at it. So people ask you to manage other people and to lead teams. And you are no longer judged on being good at that thing. There comes a tipping point when you are judged on the way your team delivers.
Yeah.
But you've usually got to that point because you're really good at doing the thing yourself. And so giving up is really, really hard, and recognizing that you don't have to do it all yourself and you'll be measured actually on what the whole team does. And that's bad enough when you're in technical, like team management, so you're actually working with people who do the thing that you used to do. When you then get to a really senior level, like as chief exec role, like I am, I'm having to manage, support, lead teams of people who do stuff that I would never be able to do in a month of Sundays. So lawyers and accountants and IT people. So then you really have to learn to surround yourself with people who can do all the things you can't. And I've really seen this sometimes when I'm looking at recruitment, where a hiring manager deliberately seems to go for the not the best candidate, but the next one down, because they don't want that best candidate to show them up.
Mm.
And you think, actually, that's the message. Surround yourself with people who are better than you are. Not least because you're never going to progress into another role if nobody can come up behind you and take over yours. So, yeah, I think a good way I heard it described was that once you get to a senior leadership role, your job is to conduct the orchestra, not to play all the parts yourself.
Yeah, nice. Love it. No, that's so true. And I think there's everything you say there, it comes around like having a team that you trust and
Yeah.
delegating. And yeah, I totally get it. No, that's great. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about the Royal College, because as we've said a few times now, you've been there for a very long time, which is wonderful. And you've obviously led significant change during that time. What has been like the most rewarding part of your journey so far? Are there any like moments that stand out so far?
Yeah, I mean, actually, when I was thinking about having been here, it's a good time to be having this conversation because I've been in kind of reflective mode recently because of that anniversary. There's actually a huge amount that's changed in the college, but there's also some stuff that hasn't changed. So I found an old copy of RCVS News, our publication from the year that I joined, and there's loads of stuff in there that we said we were working on and we're still working on. So it's kind of like rush, 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 slow down type tempo. I think personally, the thing that's meant the most to me has been our mental health work. So we launched Mind Matters, our mental health program, 10 years ago. And I launched that project. It wasn't something that I had any expertise in. I did an awful lot of research and again, brought people with me who knew what they were doing. That was really key. And at the time, VetLife was around. So at the time, it was called the Veterinary Benevolent Fund. And that was doing amazing support work, as always it is. But the structure and the culture wasn't there in the profession to really allow VetLife to do its bit. So people didn't know what good mental health looked like. They didn't know what bad mental health looked like. They didn't know where to seek help. They didn't have confidence that if they sought help, they would be reintegrated back into their profession. They're really scared that they get struck off, which we would never do for somebody who's got a mental health complaint. They were worried they get stigmatized, all of that stuff. So the Mind Matters initiative really looked at the whole pitch. Okay, what is it that we need to support people? How do we need to change the environment in which people are working so that they can not end up with mental health issues? And how can we give them the tools and the skills that they need to look after themselves and support themselves? And now there's a mental health stream at every conference. Many vets individually have sprung up who are running consultancies in the space. VetLife, the use of VetLife has gone up and up and up. And by the way, I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing. I think that shows that it's a positive that people know where to go to seek help and are actually
Yeah.
feeling positive about seeking help. And Webinar Vet has been amazing in terms of helping with that whole journey as well. And one of the very first, Anthony was one of the very first supporters of the work that we were doing in the mindfulness courses that we ran.
Yeah.
And I think the issues that we're looking at there have always been there, but we're now starting to address them. Having said all of that, I think we do still need to capture and celebrate what's great about being a vet and encourage people to see the benefits. I think there's a risk that the pendulum can kind of swing too far and people get too focused on the negatives. So
Yeah.
yes, there are high levels of suicide, but that is often due to high levels of, well, it's not so much about the ideation, the thoughts about suicide, but it's the completion rates because of the access to means that the veterinary profession has. That's not to say that one suicide isn't, obviously one too many, but we need to make sure we're not just focusing on those things. So yeah, you say about moments, actually, though, that's a 10-year project, but the first moment for me in Mind Matters that really stuck in my mind as a change was I was at a conference and a vet came up to me and she just said, literally, if I hadn't gone on that course, that Mind Matters course, and learnt different ways about how I should be thinking about my life, I wouldn't be here now. And that was like so powerful to me.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, and we did a lot with you, didn't we?
Yeah,
With the Mind
absolutely.
Matters at the start. And again, we'd get so many wonderful like emails or messages on socials, which were just, really saying how amazing all the content that you have put out there, how it has made them really enjoy being a vet or a vet nurse again, which is
Yeah, it was great.
absolutely incredible. I guess on the flip side of that, has there been any moments that you've had difficulties, a bit of resistance to change where you might have had like pushbacks on your sort of leadership style?
Yeah. I mean, I think the culture stuff, the culture changes that we've tried to get involved with has caused some issues. Particularly,
Right.
you know, you know what the kind of agenda is that people have is, oh, it's all, you're being woke, you're forcing your ideas down people's throats. Too much focus on EDI, and where we heard that recently. You know, that whole area where people don't really understand what it is we're trying to do. And I think if being woke means not being asleep at the wheel and letting the profession kind of like drive itself into a monoculture, then yeah, guilty as charged. I mean, by not looking at the full extent of equality and diversity and inclusion, then you can really miss out on some great talent within the profession. I think it's really, really important to get that in. It's not just been about the kind of the culture stuff though. I mean, I think a good example recently of something, a different space altogether, was around environmental sustainability. So when we made our changes to our undercare guidance, we held the line that prescription of endo and ectoparasiticides should have a physical examination alongside them, and that was partly to do with sustainability of the products, so to avoid resistance, but also from the environmental perspective. And at the time, I think we were really chastised for that, and it was seen as quite a negative thing. But you know, only recently there's been more data out about the impact of some of these products on the environment, and I think we were right to say that, even though it wasn't always the easiest thing to say. So, kind of
Yeah.
almost like by the nature of what we do, we have to be a bit ahead of the game. I think what we need to do as an organisation, where we need to look to ourselves, is to bring people with us better. And I don't think we're doing that as well as we could do or should do. Not to assume that people know what we're talking about, or even that they're already doing the things we think they should be doing, but really listening and making sure we bring people with us. And we've got a new strategy plan that I'm just working on at the moment. And it's actually weirdly going backwards to go forward. So if I explain that, so back in 1844, when we were founded, our motto was Vis Unita Fortior, which means essentially stronger together. And I've tried to reimagine that, like for the 21st century, by saying, okay, what does that mean now? Being stronger together isn't just loads of vets bounding together. It's vets and animal owners and nurses and politicians and everybody coming together, environmentalists, everybody in that kind of One Health space as well, and saying, what do we do together? How can we come together on these topics? And I think we've been guilty in the past of having some really good ideas, but not necessarily bringing people with us on that journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, interesting. No, that sounds good. And also, I guess even just like, you are covering so much ground, aren't you? Even all the different things you've talked about, so far during this conversation. How do you kind of, thinking about you sort of personally, how do you sort of deal with all this pressure and everything that comes along with, being a CEO for, an organisation such as the Royal College? Is there anything that you do to kind of like manage your well-being?
I think ironically, I mean, it is ironic given I stand on the stage and talk about mental health and well-being, that I'm really not very good at it myself. I'm much more a do as I say rather than do as I do person. Like yesterday, for example, was Sunday. I worked 11 hours flat, didn't leave my desk. Actually, when I got up to go and get a drink, like I had pins and needles in my leg and I could hardly walk because I hadn't moved. I'm going to be getting DVT if I'm not careful. I think my difficulty is that because we're sort of a quasi public body, it's really hard to say no to things in the same way that you would if you're a private organisation. So the workload just goes up and up and up because people just want more. They expect to do more. There's a load of unexpected stuff comes along. You know, at the moment we're busy dealing with the Competition and Markets Authority
Yeah.
investigation, which has taken a huge amount of time, and they've got really set deadlines. And if you miss the deadlines, you're fined. And you know, um, it's quite tricky. And I
Mm.
think the irony, and it's not just for me being a chief exec, but I think if you talk to most leaders of organizations, like it's not a question of, so your friend might say to you, why are you working such long hours, surely you run the business, and you're like, well no, actually the business runs me. You are at the mercy of everything that everybody wants you to
Yeah.
do, and you can't say no to it always very easily. So yeah, it is difficult. What do I do to help? I think the main thing for me is going outside, actually.
Yeah.
I find it always helps. I was brought up on a farm, so like being outside, nature's in my blood, and so trying to get out at least some part of every day is really, really helpful to me.
Yeah, especially now we're starting to hopefully see some sunshine and some nicer
Yeah,
weather.
yeah. Although, ironically, so when I'm working at home here in Oxford, which is relatively rural, I hardly ever get outside because I'm stuck at my desk. Whereas when I'm in London, which I go into London 2 or 3 days for sometimes, I'm walking a lot more. I'm zipping about between meetings. I'll always try and walk to meetings rather than catch the tube or whatever. Not
Mm-hmm.
least I get quite travel sick, so I'm always walking. So I walk a lot more in the city than I do at home. It's kind of weird.
You should get one of those watches and become obsessed with your steps. That might motivate you to
Yeah.
get out more.
Well, I've actually been thinking of getting although I'd look like a complete spanner if I did it, but one of those sort of walking treadmills that you can have at your desk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really good. They are. I would recommend them.
Next time we do one of these, Kathryn,
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
be
both get
walking
them
as we're
out.
talking.
Sounds good. Okay, brilliant. So that's kind of you personally and how you sort of, try and manage your mental health and well-being. In terms of the veterinary profession, obviously it's come on so much, but is there anything else that you think that could change now to better support the profession's mental health?
I think my Matter's done a brilliant job, and I've got a fabulous team now led by Anne Carabelcher and Rapinda Newton who take this forward, and Sam. And I think my Matters takes a really important place. But I also think there's something about doing things at micro level. So as all taking responsibility for our mental health and other people's. Like the initiative can set the scene, provide the resources, but you have to make it make a difference. So I think really it comes down to talking to people in your team and listening, or your family or your friends, and listening to what it is they're saying, and then encouraging some action. It could be something really, really small, because there's no like one size fits all. Something that I think is golden is giving a member of your team the time to think about what they need, because we all get really, really busy, nose to the grindstone, and actually if you can step back for just for 5 minutes and think about what you could do differently, that can be really helpful. So yeah, I'm all for just taking little tiny granular things and making them happen.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that sounds great. Obviously, we mentioned recently as well, on the other side of the world, lots of things are being scaled back at the moment, aren't they, in terms of diversity and inclusion efforts. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit while you were here. If you could kind of make one bold change today to try and accelerate diversity and inclusion for the profession, what would it be?
It's an interesting one. So the profession is science-based and evidence-based profession, and I'm a strong believer as an arts graduate and in the power of stories. And I think stories really do have a place. But I would actually really like to see some research about outcomes from diverse teams, because I think we talk a lot about this, and I'm fully supportive of having diverse teams. But I'm not sure that there's anything specific in the veterinary world. And if there is, I would genuinely love to see it, which might help convince some of those people who are harder to convince around this. There's some bad narratives now coming.
Yeah.
The whole, well, this plane wouldn't have crashed if we hadn't had EDI policies. Excuse me. And that stuff is then taken as gospel. And I think we need to fight back with some hard evidence. So if such a thing exists, I would be really keen to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody listening knows of any, please do let us know.
I mean, we know in our hearts it's the right thing,
Yeah.
absolutely, but it's getting that extra level.
Yeah, absolutely. What role do you think leaders and organisations like the Royal College play in driving sort of real, lasting change with diversity and inclusion?
I mean, I think part of the thing that we can do is recognise how complex it is.
Yeah,
I know that sounds a bit trite, but I think the veterinary profession is, especially leads in the veterinary profession, are made up of solution people, problem solvers, people who want things to happen quickly. And I think turning around a tanker like a kind of diversity and inclusion issues is complicated and takes time. There's intersectionality to look at. There's nothing that's quite straightforward, and you're dealing with people and their emotions. So it has to be real work, not just kind of putative stuff about ticking boxes and what have you. So a good example of that is, it's not just about having an open door to let people from, say, different racial backgrounds come into your profession, but it's about showing them what that might look like with some real case studies, but then also watching how that experience is for them, checking in with them, adapting things to help better champion and sustain their contribution. So not about checking a box, but checking in. That's a nice headline, isn't it? But really talk to people. And I think sometimes some of the tick boxy stuff that we have about X percentage of people of this kind need to be in there, that's fine. But once they're in, then what's their experience and how are they treated? So I don't think there's any easy answers. I think it's about being patient, it's about listening, it's about watching things, it's about recognizing that there'll be ebbs and flows in the process, and then we need to learn to live with it. I think right now, given what's happening over the pond, I think one of the main things that we can do is to be with the people who are from minorities and to stand with them in a really strong way and say, we are here for you. I certainly have done that with my own staff teams recently, to say, look, regardless of what you're hearing, we're not wavering in our commitment to support you.
yeah, brilliant. No, that's a really good piece of advice. There is lots of uncertainty right now, isn't there? So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah. And then looking towards the future of veterinary medicine, Is there anything at the moment that is sort of really exciting you in the veterinary field?
Exciting me. I think there's two things that we're going to have a big impact over the next few years, or three actually. One is I am really hopeful we're going to get a new veterinary surgeons act before too long, and I think that will help unlock quite a lot of changes that we've been wanting to make in terms of how we regulate the profession for some time, enable us to regulate in a much more holistic way with practices as well as people, really bolster the role of veterinary nurses, enable us to do more with allied professionals, so that the members of the public have one place to come to see who's fit to work with their animals. So I think that's really exciting. I think the possibilities of AI, artificial intelligence, really exciting, although a bit daunting. And for an old person like me, I'm not sure I necessarily understand all the ins and outs of it. But I think there's lots of opportunities there to really liberate vets and veterinary nurses to focus on things where they can add the most benefit, and to get technology to do the rest. And I think the other thing, which again is kind of a bit scary in some ways because it's a lot of unknown, but I think the outcomes of the Competition Markets Authority work will also be quite exciting, because I think what it has done is reminded us that we can talk as much as we like about animal health and welfare outcomes, but that will only really work if the person paying the bill is brought into that conversation. It's not a pure science over here, and then there's mucky commercial reality over here. Those two have to be brought together in a meaningful way. And I think there's lots of opportunities for the professions to really show the public and consumers that they get that, and that they understand that hard-won trust is only there because they continue to understand what consumers want. So I think, those three things could be really exciting in the next few years.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting times, isn't it, as we go into 2025? Yeah. And I know you've done a lot around AI as well, haven't you? So it's
Well, we've done a bit. We've had a workshop, and we're now looking at how we can look at some sort of self-regulatory model. So we only regulate how vets and nurses might use AI, not the actual devices themselves. And we don't have the ability to do that, but no other organisation does for veterinary ones. So we're looking at whether the people who develop them can come up with some sort of system that enables vets and nurses to look at them to go, okay, that one's got transparency over all these things that I need, therefore it's something that I can use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brilliant. No, interesting times. And then just back, I mentioned at the start, this is a kind of International Women's Day episode. So the theme this year is all around accelerating action, which is great. What do you think one bold move is going to be this year that you would like to make to help to push the profession forward?
So it seems to be a bit of a theme of the things that I've said, but I think boldness comes down to actually doing small things well. So you could have a big bold initiative, but actually it's about everybody doing one thing rather than a few people doing one big thing, if that makes sense. So the thing that I would suggest is that women in the workplace are cheerleaders for another woman, or women, including everybody who identifies as women as well. I think that's important to say. And doing that will be good for you, because nothing improves your well-being like doing something for somebody else, right? It'd be good for them, but it will also be good for the profession and women in the workplace generally, because we all rise when one rises. So I think that'll be a really important message. And women are not always good cheerleaders of themselves. You've got that whole imposter syndrome thing that we talked about, that kind of fear of blowing your own trumpet, but they will do it for another woman. So if everybody does it for somebody else, then hopefully that will mean there's improvements for everybody.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's such a lovely thing that you can just go away and implement straight away in practice. It could have this huge impact straight away. So yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then finally, just to finish, if you could leave one message for women in veterinary medicine today, what would that be?
So there's a lot of women in veterinary medicine now. We've got more and more than we've ever had. The profession is full of really brilliant women, some of whom are visible and some not so visible. But I do get a sense that some are holding themselves back from having fulfilling careers, partly because they're trying to juggle a million things as well. So I think my main message for women in veterinary medicine is to have confidence in yourself. You pass those exams, they're really difficult. You've got on the register. You're working in a field that falls into the kind of dream job category for so many people, and you are doing it. And it might not always feel great, but this is what it feels like to do it. This is it. You can do it. You are good enough. In fact, you're better than good enough. I, as the chief executive of your regulator, I have confidence in you. I would bring my cat to you. I can't say any more than that.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Lizzie. That's exactly why we wanted you here today. You're very inspiring and always say wonderful things. So that's a lovely place to finish. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Same to you, Kathryn, and all your team.